Hello, Internet. I'm back. Had a crazy long conversation with Stephen. Quite surprising. If you've been paying attention to the time on my on my computer, the real world time where I live, you may be able to infer how long. I actually am not paying attention, so I have no idea how long it was. But it was an awesome conversation. We talked about. Stephen always has so many wonderful things to talk about, and I have things to talk about too. It's great. I wish I hung out with him more. But we talked a little about the game he's making on Amazon, what he can tell me anyway. We talked about photography, we talked about economies. I asked him the question about the game, and maybe that's what I should jump to. That's what you guys are most interested in, right? Also, show recommendation, whatever. It was a big catch-up conversation, right? It was great. Yeah, so I asked him about this change, right? Like, if people can have, if their inventories basically, right, dramatically increase, how does that affect the economy? And Stephen was like, I don't know, which is fair. And the game he's working on isn't, it's not, you could say that Poppy Seed Pets, is it an MMO? I don't know, but the economy has a similar sort of MMO-ness to it, right? And his game is not that. There isn't any player-to-player market that I'm aware of. So he really didn't know. His advice, which was funny, but I think also there's some truth there, is he said, look at what Diablo 3 did and do none of that. Don't do anything that they did, which was funny. I mean, I've heard a couple things about that. I mean, I know they changed it and everything. It's an interesting comparison. Diablo 3 isn't quite MMO-y, but again, the marketplace gets similar, and they did it. Part of it was to make money, right? They were like, oh, people are going to buy and sell our stuff on eBay anyway. So we want some of that money, right? So that was part of the motivation between letting people exchange with real dollars. I think that was the first system that I think utterly failed, and they went back on. I don't know where they landed now, but anyway, I think what's most interesting about that, because it's something I've read about, heard about when I was following psychology more, reading psychology books and everything else. One lesson that I had heard. Oh, and sorry, these are all the videos I'm recording. You don't actually need to see those. Not that this is any more interesting at this time, but we'll get there. But anyway, a thing that I had heard was that, people love success stories. They're like, oh, we want a successful person to come and give a talk. We want, we want to read books by people who are successful. And that was actually a horrible cognitive mistake that brains make. And that actually the lessons from people who did not succeed, people who have failed, had just as much or more to teach. That there are a lot of ways to succeed, and they vary wildly. But I think this was part, if I'm remembering properly. But the ways to fail, again, are just more instructive. They're more commonly applicable. I hope I'm remembering everything right. I mean, it was years ago that I was reading this stuff. And I think that was too, I mean, there was like a huge thing that happened in like psychology as a field where they were like, oh no, we can't reproduce any of our experiments. What's happening? A sort of a crisis there. But I don't know that really applies to this, but anyway. So anyway, yeah, looking at games where things didn't work, right? That is absolutely a fair thing to do, as well as games that did. So I don't know. For now, I'm going to go forward with the basement. Intuitively, I think that if people can hold on to a ton of items, then that is more items that they will sell. Of course, that might mean that, items that right now people are throwing out, with the limited inventory that we have now, we throw out a lot of items, and I think that's fine. I mean, fine. You don't need all those fish, just throw them out. But if people can hold on to them, then that's going to drive the price down a lot. I would also suspect into it. Is that true? I don't know, right? We're really just going to have to play and see what happens. So I'm going to go for it right now. I'll read more later. I'll look at some games. What has WoW done over the course of its history? What is Dofus, a game I'm more familiar with? What have they done? And I'm actually pretty familiar with what they've done because I copied a lot of their system for SciPets, the way that they presented the market. Yeah, straight out of Dofus. But yeah, I'm sure they've tried things that didn't work out too, and I haven't followed them. There was a number of years where I just wasn't interested, not playing whatever. And I got into it a little while, but it stopped again. But I'm sure there's other games out there, right? So I'll take a look. But and the other thing to keep in mind is if I implement this and it's bullshit and everyone hates what it does, then we get rid of it, right? Like there's no reason to keep around a system that breaks things. fixing by removing is just as good and valid and often better. That's another cognitive bias. People love additive solutions, but there's a great quote. I think it's Saint Exupéry. Well, I can never remember the name because it's French and it's hard to say. Engineer. It's like Saint Exupéry. I don't know. I'm hoping I'm spelling the name right, but it's like nothing left to remove. Whatever. It's a great quote. I have it on like our. Yeah, here we go. See, I knew I'd find it. Designer knows he's achieved perfection not when there's nothing left to add, but when there is nothing left to take away, right? It's a good philosophy for engineering of all kinds. So let's follow that. I try to bring that up at work now and again. It's on. We have like a documentation wiki, and that's at the very top on the homepage. Like, keep this in mind because there's a lot. I saw that a lot in the code when I started working there, and still there's all additive solutions, and then you just have thing on top of thing on top of thing, and it compounds, and it's a horrible mess, and no one can untangle it. It's like, no, you can cut all that code out, and now your thing is better in so many ways. It's faster. It actually does what you want. It's easier to maintain. All these things. So, same thing. Any kind of engineering, any kind of design. If the why can't I think now, the basement. If the basement is causing problems, a valid solution is to get rid of it, and I'm totally open to doing that if people hate the addition once we see how it really works within the ecosystem. So anyway, let's code that thing. Something I do want to do real quick is test one of. So we made a ton of changes in the last video. It was like removing. Can I find all this stuff? Like preparing recipes. That was one. Where it was like, oh, now it matters where the items are located, right? So we've got all this new code in here. What does it work or does it crash? Did I make a mistake? I don't think I've made a mistake. I don't have any. I mean, this looks like a mistake. Expected iterable got an array. That's PHP Storm being dumb about a PHP feature that works and is valid. So that's their fault, not mine. But we're not seeing any other errors that would be legitimate. There's nothing else in here screaming like if I type this, it's going to say, "What are you doing?" Right? That's bad. So we're not seeing any more of those kinds of errors in the code. So at least syntactically, everything is good. Does it work? I don't know. Let's try it. This is a very easy recipe we can do with these sweet beets. Cook and combine. I should end up with sugar in my house and not anywhere else. It shouldn't go in the basement, right? It should go in. Here it is. So that's working. We didn't break preparing, at least. Once things are in the basement, we'll need to test again. When I prepare a sweet beet in the basement, does the sugar go into the basement? That's how it should work. And then we'll also be able to probe the API directly using Insomnia. Again, if you like Postman or something, there's other tools. There's more than this. Some IDEs, I think even actually PHP Storm has a built-in API poking tool, but I just don't even use it. I don't know why. I haven't even looked at it, honestly. Maybe it's great. But anyway, we'll use that to try and test combining things across. Like if I did, a sugar that's in the basement and a blackberries is in the house, it should say, no, you can't do that, because I wouldn't know where to put the product, as a result. I mean, that's kind of the main reason. We could come up with a complicated UI that's like, oh, you're going to prepare across, where do you want that product to go, whatever. We're not even going to let people view combined inventory. So for now, the API should just fail if you try. And, if I want to later add that feature, all that UI, it can be done at a later time. So anyway, that works great. There's a lot of other things to test. I'll test more of it later. I mean, honestly, we could just feed pets and see if even that stuff is working. I mean, anything to do with inventory has the potential now after these changes to be broken. But it looks like on the surface things are working, so that's good. Let's make the actual basement interface once this is done petting my pet. Whoops. Right, we've got nothing here. We saw that I did cheat, right, in the database. There's a rusty rapier in my basement, so that's a great place to start. Let's get the basement showing the inventory. And I think I can copy code out of, if I can find, again, all these windows. It's a little inconvenient having the smaller titles here, but I don't know, right? You guys don't need to see all nonsense I've got running. Do you need to know 3 ways to make tofu? Do you need to know about delicious vinegar peach drinks? I don't know. All right, let's go to this thing. So basement, again, I think I want to use the house as a model because the house is already displaying inventory. And if I did a good job, it's in a separate component. And the answer is kind of. So let's copy this because I think this is where we're going to start. And actually, we're going to want all this stuff too. Like all this preparing, cooking, feeding, I guess not feeding, You won't be able to feed them to pets because you won't see the pets in the basement. That's kind of, again, an arbitrary, like if you can prepare food in the basement, why can't you feed them to pets? I think it's just going to be for UI reasons. I'm just not going to show the pets while you're at home. Let me minimize this stuff. Because it's meant for managing inventory. It's kind of an arbitrary restriction. Maybe I'll figure out something later, I don't know. But what I'm kind of getting at is that if all this stuff is going to be the same, that is a signal that we should make it a component. We don't want to actually copy paste. If I was only copy pasting a loop, fine. If I'm copy pasting everything, right, this whole crazy block, right, like in the future, if I decide I want to change the text for cooking, I don't want to change it in 2 places. I want to change it in 1. It should be consistent. Reduces the less code you have, the less changes you have to make later, the less mistake, possibility for mistakes. Same thing of removing, right? It's the same reason you don't want a bunch of excess code, because more opportunity for mistakes. And yeah, there's more that we have to send to the end user, blah, 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 blah. There's just a billion reasons, so whatever. We don't have to enumerate them all. Yay, enumerators. They exist in real life, even if not in PHP. Let's make a new thing. So we're going to create a component. It'll go in the, I believe it's component, not components. Yep, component. And I guess I'm going to call this inventory. Let me make sure there's not something else called inventory. It feels like such a generic name. There's inventory item. Okay. Inventory. Make a new component called inventory. And all this code is going to go in there, and then we will just loading inventory. So what we will say is, right, we're going to have an inventory thing. It hasn't caught on, like I said. You sometimes have to tell PHP Storm. And all this code is going to go in there instead. And we're probably going to have to rejigger, pull some things out, maybe put some things back in. We'll figure it out. But this is kind of the basics. And I think the key here is, right, when you're at home, you want the house's inventory. When you're in the basement, you want the basement's inventory. Who's responsible for loading that is a question to ask. I was tempted, before I started talking, to say, I'll let the house load it, and then the house will give it to the inventory. And actually, I think that's like this inventory component, right? So the alternative would be let the inventory component handle it itself, and you would just give to the inventory component, here's a location I want you to look at. I want you to look at location 0, right, which is the house, or location 1, which is the basement, and let it handle everything. The reason I think that won't work now, as I'm talking through this, is that we want to be able to feed things to pets, which means, only on the home page there will be pets. So we're going to need, I think we want the inventory, the house, to load the inventory, because the pets also don't render until the inventory is loaded because of that interaction. It's also interesting that if we go to the inventory component, we have feeding, right? This will only be available. We'll need a way to control this on the component. Let's start there. Well, but we can't see. We're not going to be able to see anything right now. Yeah, it's just going to error out because it's like, hey, you don't have that component, right? Yeah, it's like freaking out on me. I think the error ticker is counting up. So I need to do something to fix this. Sorry, I moved this off the screen. So sorry, let's actually get this working. We need to pass in the inventory to it. I think, again, the house needs to care about the inventory because the inventory is also passed in for the pets. Like when you click a pet, here are all the tools, right? I don't have to reload the inventory for that. That's nonsense. So I think we're going to pass the inventory in, which means this needs an input. And this is how you do this in Angular. Say this component has an input. This input is called inventory. And then it's up to containing things like the house to say, oh, I'm calling the inventory. Yeah, here's the inventory you're going to use, right? Loop over those. There's still going to be some undefined. I think there's still going to be problems here. Failed to execute observe, type failed to execute observe. I think some of that is because I get some errors locally because of this. Service workers are disabled, not supported. They are supported by the browser. So this is referring to like it's the progressive web app stuff, the stuff that makes it work as an app on your phone. That whole library freaks out locally. It'll work on a browser even when you're not on a phone. But when it's running locally, there's just some things it can't do. So it errors out, which is fine. That I'm expecting. Browsing of undefined in the inventory component, line 6. So let's see what that's about. Line 6. If mode enum. Okay, so we have the inventory has a notion of like, what's my current mode that I'm in, and that will control the buttons I'm on. so it doesn't have that variable in here. We need to now move that out. That's another interesting thing, because when you're in feeding mode, we also style the pets a little differently. I guess now what I'm thinking actually is maybe the pets and the inventory all go in one big component, and then we just say like, include pets, yes or no, and if pets are included, then it includes them and shows the feeding button and all that kind of stuff. That might be the way to do it, because they're so closely related. The pets have to interact with items, and the pets interact with the mode. I mean, I'll show you. We can find the working site. What the problem is here is, right, when you say cook and combine, we disable this because you can't interact with it in this mode. Or when you have feed, they're disabled until you select an item. Then it's like, okay, now you can click on a pet, right? So I have these UI things, and if these are completely separate components, yes, there are ways that you can have things communicate. We have that input. There's also outputs, so we could kind of do that kind of thing, but the increasing number of things that are tied in, right, the tools of the other thing, is making me think that maybe it is just one component that renders all this stuff. I don't know. Feels a little weird to me to do that. But maybe that's the way to do it. I mean, the alternative is to rebuild this stuff, but the interaction is going to be so common. Like, we're going to want cook and combine and throw out in the basement. We're going to want to let you sort, right? We're going to want all that. Hold on. So that's actually a really good point. When you have thousands and thousands of items, these will need to be paginated, which means sorting is going to work entirely different. That's part of the reason for the limit as well. On a phone, when you're preparing food, that's going to be hard to do, right? When you're preparing food, if the food items are on multiple pages, having you select across multiple pages isn't impossible, but it's sure more difficult. So now I'm thinking that maybe they shouldn't be the same component at all. Okay, well, here's a great advantage of, here's another reason that Git is great. You go in here and you say, hey, you know those changes I made? Don't make those changes. These changes right here, right? I don't want to remember exactly how to undo that. Right? I mean, yeah, I could copy paste back, but I've changed other things. You know what? So you just come in here and say revert. You're done. We're not doing that change after all. Inventory component, same thing. We can get rid of it actually. We're not going to use that inventory component. And I think in here it will have added, yeah, well, at least we can see. So we won't actually have the inventory component, and we won't actually have the inventory component. But we do want that basement component. Right? So this is a great tool to be able to, you don't have all the features, right, of PHPMyAdmin. You can't do all your coding in here, but it lets us see the differences very easily. So I think menu, that's all good. Didn't make any other changes. Most of unlocked basement. Okay, that should all be fine now. Sometimes doing those kinds of things makes Angular freak out, so we'll see what happened if I reload here. Actually, it looks like my items are back, so it already did reload. I thought, because the error is on this side, that maybe it was still on that errored page, but that was probably the, yeah, just the service worker stuff freaking out. Yeah, this is all related to the service worker. It's fine. Again, the progressive web app stuff. So anyway, great. Thinking through, learned some things. Let's code up the basement, I guess, in a way from scratch. Some things can be similar. So like the list of buttons using the class called inventory control. That is defined control is good, because this has that property where it sticks to the top like this. That we're going to want the exact same thing, right? So that is out in a global CSS file. Every component can have its own CSS that's unique to that component, so that if that was locked right now into the home component, I'd want to move that out. Looks like I already have it moved out, so that's good. I don't know how I anticipated that. That seems like an accident. It probably shouldn't be out here because it's applied nowhere else, but that's okay. And the reason you wouldn't want to just move everything into global CSS is for those module reasons I was talking about. We don't want to deliver the entire application in the long run to the end user. That's a lot of code. We would like to deliver just the parts they need, and then when they click into like the help pages, it's like, okay, now you can have all the help code and the CSS related, right, and all those things. So you don't want to shove everything into a global space. It seems it's more convenient. It feels more convenient, especially initially. But for performance reasons like that, and also just for managing things, that folder's left over. Also just for managing in your own head, like you want to scroll through a file that's 1,000 lines long. There's no way you'll find anything, right? But if you know it's related to the house, then you say, oh, let me go into the house component and see its CSS, right? It's all bundled together and it keeps things tidy. So again, a lot of reasons to do it that way. So anyway, I'm surprised this is already pulled out into a common location, but it is. That happens to be convenient for us. So all right, I'll take advantage of it. So these button controls, we're gonna copy the same idea. It looks like it waits for inventory to be loaded, which is smart. So let's copy all this for now, and then we're gonna modify it. I'm a little sad to be copying, but maybe as we develop this out, you know, I'll see things where it's like, oh, I could that can be abstracted away, right? That can be copied out, things like that. So I think there isn't going to be any maximum to the basement, at least that I can think of right now. So I'm going to get rid of that. We don't need to show that. We don't need to show this thing about, oh no, it's full, with this little help link, because again, not going to have anything like that. If the inventory length is greater than 6, then we show sort options. That's interesting. I didn't remember that I did that at the house, just to not, again, I'm trying to not bombard a new person with UI. So anytime I can hide UI that isn't needed, I mean, that's part of why these are unlocked too. Like, a new player doesn't need to worry themselves about bookstores and stuff like that, right? There's too many things. So it's just like here's the game, right? Here's 3 things. Okay, and then it reveals itself to you over time. At every level, same for this thing. There's no reason to put this here if you have only 1 item in the house. Just don't even distract a new user with that, right? So that's why I have this logic here. For the basement, I guess, why not? I mean, this logic is going to change entirely anyway, because, again, with like the pagination, like right now when you change the order, it just reorders them in memory. It doesn't have to go out to the API to get the new items. But when we have, again, thousands of items, and we're not going to put all those on one page. That would slow down your phone and even your desktop. It was happening on SciPets, traditional SciPets. And the pages would just take forever to load. You got to do pagination, right? That's why any website does this. I mean, right, that's obvious. I don't need to talk about that. No one needs convincing about that fact. Let's get rid of the feeding option. We're not going to have that. Trashing, cooking, and then when you're browsing, it just shows that, and that's the default state. Okay, so we need this mode variable. It's white because it is like, I don't know where to find this variable. That's some more color help from the IDE. In this case, it's a little unfortunate. Like, I don't know. I've never heard of .length on an inventory property. It's trying to find inventory in interesting places. I thought I did add it to the basement component, though. Where's that basement? Oh, I thought I did. Well, anyway, so we're going to need inventory. We're going to need a mode, which is of type mode enum. I wonder if that's locked away in the house. It's not auto-completing for me, so that's what's cluing me in that something is odd. Home. I may have thrown it on the bottom like a lazy person. I sure did. So that should be in its own place. It needs to be used by both now, right? So I'm moving it out to a common location. So I'm going to throw that into model. And I'm going to call that mode enum. And actually, I think I want to call this like inventory mode to be a little more specific, because mode's like mode of what? A bajillion things can have a mode, right? So we're going to call this inventory mode. Okay, and then, yep, all these will be angry, rightly so. This is inventory mode, same feature, right? We're still PHP myadmin, different language, same feature. You let it autocomplete and it will automatically add the imports for you up top. And we'll need to, we won't, there isn't an old, and you can see, so this is what I'm talking about, the coloring, right? Before, browsing was white because it was like, I don't know what mode enum is, so I certainly don't know what .browsing on that thing is. But once we tell it, it's like, oh yeah, I do know. And not only do I know what an inventory mode enum is, I know that it has a browsing property. If we did something else like, hey, well, then it's red, it's strongly typed. Anyway, different colors for different hints, it's helpful. All these things need to be correct mode. There's another one. If you click cook, yep, and we start you off. And this thing is kind of silly. We'll change that as well. I mean, I don't know if we even need to talk about it. It's silly, whatever, silly stuff. It's so that it's accessible in here for silly reasons, for silly TypeScript. It's not even TypeScript reasons. I think that's Angular reasons or a combination. But we want that enum available out here. And I could have kept it named mode enum, but that's just confusing to me to have the same thing called 2 different things. Yeah, that seems like a mistake. But maybe in this context it wouldn't have been confusing. I don't know. All right. So now when we go to the basement, we should be all set. You're of type mode inventory mode enum, and you need to be equal to browsing at the start. And we need the same thing here. These should all be mode enum. Great, just making sure. And then we also need to have that same thing where we say inventory mode. This is to me nothing in. So this is why when you're on the HTML side, you can't refer to anything that isn't a public variable of this class, right? And what do I mean by public? I mean you could note something that's private, and then it's not accessible in the HTML. It's got to be public. Public is the default. So even though there is this inventory mode enum thing available on a global scope everywhere in the TypeScript, it's not available in the HTML because the HTML says, no, I'm only looking at what's inside here. There's some weird exceptions with pipes and things. I don't know why the enums. I feel like those should be available, but whatever, they're not. So in order to make them available, we make a local variable called inventory mode enum, and we make it equal to the global inventory mode enum that TypeScript has access to in this location, right? It's very wonky, and that makes it available in the HTML. And that's why I was saying we could have called it mode enum. We could say, oh, but it's called mode enum, and then in here it would be mode enum. But again, why have the name be different? That seems like that's asking for confusion. You know, later on down the line, I'll add pet mode enum, and then I'll be like, why is there a mode enum and a pet mode enum? You know, whatever. Just name them what they're named. We're not trying to save characters here. So let's see. Inventory mode enum not defined. Oh, it didn't. That's interesting. It didn't add the import. Didn't add the import. Let's see what happens if I do inventory mode enum. Why are we not getting that import line? Oops. Let's see what it did at home. Oh, well, okay, this needs to be export. That is a thing. That's the problem. You have to export. I would see this here, right? Export interface. All these TS files need to export the thing that's made available. I don't know why PHP Storm wasn't complaining hard about it. Now it's like, hey, okay, now it works. That's interesting. I don't know why PHP Storm does that. I'm not sure. I must be decent at remembering to put export at the top, because I don't remember that as a problem that I've run into before. All right, so home should still work. Browsing of undefined, so apparently not. Home component line 25. I still have something wrong with this thing. Line 25. Inventory mode enum. Inventory mode enum doesn't have it. Sure should. It's possible that sometimes Angular gets in a confused state. Yeah, we can see that here. It says error file inventory mode enum is not a module. I think it's confused. I was probably confused because I didn't have an export line or something it was trying to tell me over here. So I'm going to quit and restart, or maybe not. If it comes back with that error, then I'll know there's more to look into. But sometimes when you change files too quickly, basically, it doesn't manage to catch up. You can get that problem a lot when you're doing operations in Git. I think I kind of referenced that when I was deleting those files. I was like, oh, I hope I didn't confuse Angular. Because when you're making changes to files super quickly, it doesn't always catch up. Yeah, see, now it says no problem, and I bet if we go here, it's going to work now. Yeah, we're not getting an error. So that was just Angular getting confused. Actually, yeah, I spoke too soon. We actually needed to wait for it to load. But anyway, we're here, and I don't know, let's feed some sugar to Royina. Yeah, it is working. And then if we go to the basement, we're not going to see the items yet. Those aren't loading in. And actually, I've crashed other things, but we can see that the items, or the toolbar appeared back there. But if we go to, so let's do some things. Inventory, we're going to want that in the basement as well, and that definition makes sense to me. We have a serialization group. These are, again, these helpful just for type hinting purposes. This is the structure that we get back from the API, so it's helpful to have that represented in code. And again, if you're worried about efficiencies, as a programmer, interfaces in TypeScript get compiled away into nothing. All this code goes away, 100%. It adds nothing. Code-wise, it's just for helping you as a developer to keep things sane. I happens to actually explicitly mark this public. Again, everything is public by default. I'm going to get rid of that. Yeah, I don't know. I think different languages are different. Like in C#, which I was probably coding in C# at the same time that I was doing this or something, or had just gotten off of some C# thing where you have to say public or private. You can't just, or private is the default, right? Like every language is a little different about this. So that's probably why I was spelling it out there and not doing it here. That's just, yeah, every language is different. So right, so the error it was having before, it was like, you can't call length on this thing. I don't know what that means. That's because we didn't tell it, oh, it's an array. Although it is defaulted to null. So, but I think we have a check in our inventory. In our basement. Yeah, if the inventory isn't null, it would have defaulted to undefined before, because JavaScript, that's the default value. That's a weird thing that JavaScript has that I haven't seen in many other languages. Most languages, if you don't assign a value, the value is null. JavaScript has null and it has undefined, which is, I don't know, extra special. So anyway, now that we've given it a default of null and everything, this is working out properly, and we're not seeing the controls. Actually, we saw them before, it was showing them. That was nice to see, but we shouldn't have been, because there's no inventory. So now to load the inventory, and again, we can copy paste some code out of the home. It'll be a much smaller amount of code that I don't feel bad about copy pasting. Let's go find that though. I think I've already closed a bunch of things. Yeah, I don't have too much stuff open. Okay, page. So this is going to call, right? What we need to do is do this, and the only difference from the home is just doing my, which by default gets everything out of location 0. We set that up in the other video. All it needs to do is have a 1 at the end to get things from 1. And again, the code, I believe, is very minor. I don't feel bad loading it. Here it is. Load inventory. Here's the URL. It does some sorting logic. We're actually going to get rid of that. And then return R, because it's map. Pipes into map. It's interesting. I don't remember why I did that. Why isn't that just a subscription? I don't know. It may have once been something else, or maybe I'm forgetting something. I intuit some of those functions I just haven't used as much, so they're not as readily available to my brain or something, right? Does that make sense? I don't have the experience with them yet to just read and immediately be like, oh, because, you know, X, Y, Z thing. All right, we need to have the API service here. This is a service I made that's responsible for talking to the API. It does all kinds of things like handles your session and blah, 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 handles errors, does all this stuff automatically. Again, we're not going to sort. And this returns an observable. I guess that's why I'm using map here, is because this thing, load inventory, is, I guess, hooked in somewhere else. Let's see how it's used in here, because I do need to call it. I assumed I was just going to call it the moment the component loads. Reload inventory. Anytime you ask to reload the inventory, if the thing is closed. What's this? Subscribe. Waiting on Ajax if there's an error. Okay, that's part of why. Okay, so what I'm seeing here is that so like here's on init, right? This is what we want. The moment the basement page is initialized, we're going to want to call load inventory and subscribe and be done. And subscribe means it's an asynchronous call, like, right? You're sending it off to the API. The API is going to get back to you someday. I don't know when. We don't want to block the rest of the web page from thinking about things and displaying things, you know, to the user while it's loading. So if we just do this and say just load inventory, it won't actually do anything. We have to say, I'll actually go and do it in this asynchronous way. And you could put extra code in here to be like, and when you're done, do X, Y, or Z, right? This place, it doesn't do that. It doesn't care. In other places, it does. So here, if you're throwing away items, it says, okay, I'm going to make this call to the API to throw things away. Once that's done, I actually need to load up the inventory. And once that's done, then we're really all done with the whole operation, right? We're done with the whole throwaway. It involves these 2 steps. And if there's an error, I do as well. I think there's a way to combine those with final, but anyway, or finally, there's something like that. Anyway, or if the throwaway fails, then we immediately say, fine, we're done. The throwaway failed for some reason. And you'll see, because of that, again, that API where I globally handle errors, as I mentioned, anything that returns an error, it shows up on the bottom down here as a little red thing, right? So all that's taken care of for us. I can just say, done, you know, and show the error to the person. They can decide what they want to do about it. The code doesn't need to decide. It turns out, not in this case. In some cases it would. So this same code, sorry, no, I don't need this, but I do want to load up the inventory at the front. I don't even know why I copied that. I'm not going to use it. I'm going to call it. So we're going to do load inventory. We're going to later, and I guess we will subscribe, we'll later need to do stuff for pagination here, like consider what page you're on, do all that kind of stuff. I'm not worrying about that right now. I'd really like to just see something on the page. I see something. This is the wrong something, right? This is the house inventory, because I didn't put 1, which is the super secret basement code. Hey, by the way, we don't like super secret basement codes, so let's add an enumerator, an actual real enumerator, not the fake type like we have in PHP, but an actual real enumerator, for this thing, which is location, right? We call it location enum. Oops, I'm thinking in funny ways. Location.enum.ts. Okay. Did I do that properly for you the way? Yeah, interim mode.enum. This is just convention that Angular seems to do. It puts a dot component in its components, right? Like this dot component.ts, dot component.css, dot module, right? They do this like double extension thing. So Angular doesn't have opinions on how you do enumerators or serialization groups, certainly, or models in general. So I've just been kind of following its convention, saying, well, if it wants to do dot module and dot component.ts, I'll do dot model.ts and dot enum.ts. There's zero requirement to do that. I just figured I'd follow their convention. Again, just why break convention willy-nilly, being all inconsistent? That just, I don't know, more to keep track of in your head. You don't want to deal with that. I don't anyway. So anyway, let's export enum, location enum. And we will have, just double checking that I'm doing things. It's been a while since I've been in the Angular side of this. So we have home, which is equals 0, and we have basement, which equals 1. It's up to us, I guess I'm saying, or me as programmer, to keep it straight between both, right? I mean, you might notice this is duplicated. We have the exact same thing on the API side in the fake enumerator here. A way around that, if you thought that was a problem, I don't happen to think that's a problem, but if that was a problem, if it was a bigger list of things, then you might say, well, there will be an API call, you know, I need to get the list of locations or something, right? That doesn't really make sense here for other reasons. But anyway, in this case, we don't want, why bother the user with a API lookup? That will slow down the site more. So duplicating it, I think in this case, it's just fine. It's already working, but I would like to use the location enums that we're not using. Again, magic numbers that don't mean anything to anyone. So location enum, there we go, dot basement. This sort of thing would be better suited, honestly, to some sort of, I haven't done this yet on Poppy Seed Pets, although we're doing it at work where the API is much larger. It's kind of breaking this up into a function, like rather than, you know, having to know the URL. That's kind of a magic constant, right? What does that URL mean, right? In magic numbers, it might be nice to be able to say, oh, I just want to like get inventory and then pass a location, right? And the location, and you know, maybe it's the house in this case or something, right? And then you don't have to worry about all this other stuff. That it makes it a little easier as another developer. The main reason I haven't done it here is I'm the only developer. I know my API just fine. I can go and find out, right? But if it was like, you know, I'm a backend developer and I'm making the system for a front-end developer, they don't necessarily know how to code in PHP even. They might only be Angular or something. And so expecting them to go dig through your API to find all these functions, for them, that would be a lot of work, right? For me, it's not. That cognitive load is not a bother for me, so I haven't made those kind of helper functions. But anyway, once you start having parameters like this, like, oh, I have to know, like, what's the URL? How does that get passed in, right? All those things, like, you just have to know. You could wrap that up all in a function, and then the function knows, and then you don't have to know, right? But again, it's just me working on this thing. I'm comfortable with the back and front end. I'm not too worried about it. I'm not going to forget how to, you know, I'm not going to forget PHP, the entire language, in 6 months. Like, I might forget other details, but I'm not going to forget that. That's not a problem for me. So anyway, now we're getting items here. This is great. This isn't actually going to work, right? I don't know why the feed button is still there. I thought I removed that. Did I remove it from the wrong place? Were you guys watching and being like, oh no, he's removing the wrong one? Oh, we just have the button that's still here. Okay. And it shouldn't be. We just want cook and combine and throw out. But yeah, I don't expect that the modes are actually going to work right now. Because yeah, it's trying to call these functions like do cook, do trash, do cook for real, do browse, right? We need to copy those over from home and probably change some of them. Well, I'll take a look. So let's just go here. We know we don't need feed, trash, browse. We'll definitely need those. There's trash for real, cook. You know what, let's copy that whole block of them and then we'll see what we want to do. simplify, remove, delete, whatever we don't need. So waiting on Ajax, that is a thing we want. If it's currently loading inventory, I don't want the user maybe thinking it's like, oh, before that reloads, I'll take some other actions, like it's not going to work, or it's going to have unintended consequences, or things are going to load. It's a bad user experience. So we definitely want a loading on Ajax thing. It will start false. You don't have to specify the type. Like, this is actually not needed to specify the type, because it's going to figure it out. Here it wouldn't figure it out. It's like, well, null, that could be anything. Well, no, actually I want you to give me type hinting for that. PHP Storm will figure out the type hinting, as I'm saying. It will know, oh, you're an enum because that's what you initially assigned. I don't know. Again, I like being explicit for things, although why not for native types? I guess for the native types like string and int, I'm not. Is that the rule in my head? I haven't really explicitly thought about it before. I'm just, but anyway, I'm going to leave this as I initially had it, that it would make sense to do this if you were going to be consistent human in all ways, which PS humans aren't, but if you were going to strive to be one, that would be one way to do it. And then another way you might say, well, if not that, then do this. Whatever. I'm going to do this funny halfway thing because I'm an inconsistent human being. Hi, Mia. That's the cat, by the way, who's here making noises. Okay, so sorry, let's go through this. So cook, great. Cook for real, don't know that this will work as written. I think it actually might. Filter down to the selected items. I think this might work out. We'll test it out. Trash for real is in response, or that's when you click the button, yep, and then it should throw items away, and that should be fine as well. Feed, we're never going to do. Trash and browse. Inventory selected equals 0. So how does that work? That has to do with when you're clicking on items. I think I remember what this is about, is that, sorry, there's a cat on my lap, which in general is okay, but inconvenient when I'm trying to type. More convenient when I'm watching YouTube, then it's okay. I'm a weird human and sit at my desk when watching YouTube. I don't know. Because who wants an iPad? That makes no sense. You've got desktops for a reason. Whatever. That's just me being an old person, I think. I love my desktop. Where is the home thing? Right, so inventory selected. I think what happens is every time you click an item, we kind of keep a running total. Yep, for do click item. We should copy this as well. And that's just done for shortcut purposes of like, if no items are selected, then you know, don't let you click the cook and combine thing. I think we'll see that actually. I think that's exactly where it's used. So let's copy this. We're going to want that. But if we go to the basement, see, all these copied functions are making me go, I don't know. We should find some way to abstract that away. But here we go. Here's the cook for real button once you're in cooking mode, right? If the mode is cooking, we're showing these buttons. Here's one of them, do cook for real button, cook and combine. It's disabled if the number of items selected is 0, because that makes sense. Like, don't even let them click it. That's just confusing. And it gives, again, it's a good visual feedback. You're like, oh, I click cook combine. The UI changed a little bit. We have a new cook button, but it's disabled. You know, right? And then you click an item, then it's suddenly enabled again. Oh, that's how it works, right? It makes itself clear as you use it. So that's great. So let's put that do click item in here. And again, I'm going to have to figure out how to refactor this all nicely. Hi again, Mia. You still can't be on my lap. I'm sorry. Be on this adjacent chair. That's what it's for. She may or may not accept that. It depends on her whims. Mat dialog. We are going to need to open that dialog, apparently. What is that for? Oh, for viewing the item details, which you 100% would want to do. It's a reasonable request. Item details. Yeah, we'll want that feature here as well. Inventory selected. We're going to want that feature here as well. Starts as 0. That's a number. I'm not going to type int it. I think that I never really thought about that. I think that is the rule that I'm exercising in my brain without realizing it, is that the native types I'm not type hinting. Mia, no. I don't know why she wants to come up so badly. Okay, so if we click it, great, you see that. If we click cook and combine, doesn't let us do anything. It should tell us we can't make anything out of those items. I sure can't. It should let me throw out, although I don't really want to throw it out. But good, it seems like a lot of things here are working. Let's cheat some items into the basement and try to prepare them and see that that works. I think that's the next thing to do. So we'll find some sugar items. or sugar beet, right? That was the item that I have some of. No, I'm typing the name of the, or sweet beet. It's a sweet beet anyway. It's a sweet beet, like the beet. Not, I was thinking I got sugar and sweet combined, and there's an item called sweet beet with an EAT because it's a hammer, but whatever. So it's ID 11. That's all I wanted to know. So I'm going to find items in here where the owner is user1, who's me, and the item ID is 11, which is the sweet beet. Here they are. We're going to move them both into the basement, I guess. It's an interesting question, though. Will it delete the right one? I should check that in the code. Let me see that these appear here. They should. And I want to check the code for doing recipes. Yeah, because you do... Gosh, let me make sure. There's some parts of the game, like when pets are crafting, and I think I'm still going to need to fix this. They look at all the items and they just say, I just want to make sure I have enough, right? Do I have enough of these items? Do I have 3 of them in the house? But then when they actually go to delete the items from the database, it just says, oh, just delete one of those fluffs. I don't care which one. So it's possible that they could end up saying, do I have enough fluff in the house? Yes, I do. Go delete one and actually end up deleting one in the basement. And I'm worried that the cooking logic might be similar, but I think it actually isn't. But let's check, and let's just keep in our brains, and you can't interact with me, so you don't need to keep it in your brain at all. I will attempt to keep it in my brain to check the pet activity right after that. So let's go to controller, inventory controller for preparing. Yep, this is it. We're still here. Because this actually gets a list of IDs, a list of inventory IDs. We find them by the IDs provided, yep. And then we literally remove those items we found. So that's great. So that should work fine. We won't accidentally delete something from somewhere else. So let's click and combine. If we've done it right, these sugars will appear here. Ah, that's amazing. Okay, let me go. I just want to see. There's no way that an item could be listed too. We've already tested that. I mean, I do have some sugars here, but only 2, right? Because I fed 1. Yeah, everything is great. Oh yeah, I remember. These other errors come up from the recoloring. The way that I'm recoloring these SVGs makes browsers angry, but apparently not angry enough to totally fail, so it's good. I still would like to play with that. It's also a little inefficient. I just don't know a better way. I know a way, but it's worse in other ways. So anyway, I believe the basement is working. Probably not like a quick link to go between the basement and the house, right? Also, let's add loading like we do in the house. That's a small bit of code that I don't feel bad about copy pasting. Before that, the thing I almost forgot. When pets craft items, where they removed from. I think that's something. There's going to be tons of bugs. I'm going to have to test way more of this afterwards because I just know that there's going to be more. There's things like this hiding that I'm not thinking about. So, and this is the sort of thing, right? People are like, how come when you added a basement, pet activities broke? That doesn't make any sense. It's like, well, or why did opening a food box, or right? Any of those things that interact with inventory at all could have broken because there's now this whole new location they've got to be aware of. Or worse than broken, weird behaviors. Where it's like, how come when I open it in the basement, the items go in the house? Or how come the pets use items out of the basement, but only if they have enough in the house in the first place, right? Like that's just a weird bug to have, and these are the sorts of reasons why, because of code like this. So anyway, yeah, the house activity code is definitely the most complicated part. That was true of SciPets. It's true of Poppy Seed Pets, and it's appropriate that it's true. The game is about what the pets do, right? That's where the detail is, and that's enjoyed. I think that's, again, it's appropriate. People like seeing all these details about like, oh, the pet tried to steal from an egg, but then the mother pet returned, and then it was a fight, and all those things happen, and that's great. So anyway, get crafting possibilities, great. What we really want, I think, let's find, it's going to be in one of these crafting things for like, yeah, how do you create string from fluff? Simple example. You do it by losing an item, and it knows a quantity, but it doesn't know from where. So this is where we need to add the location. And we need to go back and find all the places where lose item is called and make sure that the location, and there's going to be a lot, P.S. There's going to be a lot. This might be another place where it's appropriate to make a default. So I'm breaking, this is a choice that I had been making consciously. We break backwards compatibility, like lose item, right, It used to be that quantity was the third parameter. By placing location as the third parameter, every function that passed into quantity now is accidentally passing that quantity number as location. So we've completely broken anywhere that calls the lose item. That would be more useful to me if there wasn't this default value thing going on. No, even not. That doesn't even matter. That doesn't even factor into it. It messes it up entirely. I wish that I would get errors everywhere in the code until I updated them all. The better way to do that would be make everything required. But I don't think I want quantity required, or do I? Maybe I do. Maybe quantity should be required. But the other thing I could do is I could say location defaults to the house. But again, like we saw last time, there's some cases where it's like, no, actually, I want to. It was worth it to go through the code and find all the instances of lose item, because some of them was like, oh, we actually do want a different one than was expected, you know. I think I'm going to do it the way I like quantity being optional. It should be the last parameter in that case. You can't have an optional parameter in the middle. I think in C# you can now. I don't know if that's actually true. You can specify parameters in any order you want in C#, which is interesting. It's actually kind of a neat feature. But anyway. Distractions. What we care about here, this is what we need to change. Delete from the inventory, where this is the owner, this is the item, and location equals location. Why are you angry? Whatever, you just don't know better. Okay, so yeah, it tries to connect up to your database too, PHP Storm does, in order to help you complete the database stuff. I don't know why it doesn't realize. I don't know. Whatever. I rarely care about that kind of help because I rarely write MySQL, right? I'm usually using Doctrine to do this stuff. Well, why not Doctrine? It's actually a great question. It's arguable that I should be doing this through Doctrine. Let me see. This EM, is there like a delete? Is that going to delete an entire table? Table expression. The expression of the table on which to delete the deletion criteria, an associative array containing column value pairs. Oh. And then the types of identifiers. That's optional. That's nice. Maybe that is the thing to do. Delete from, where, implode. Yeah, look, that does what we want. I'm going to do that instead. So delete inventory and then the list of conditions. Great. Owner ID is you. Owner get ID. That's the pet owner, right? So when we delete items belonging to the owner of the pet. Item ID is, hi again, Mia. Sorry, there's, okay, item get ID, and then location, we want to remove the location, and then finally the quantity. This has a limit of 1. Can we do a limit of 1 here? I don't know if we can. The number of affected rows, oh, yeah, that we don't want. This would delete everything that matches. That would be a horrible thing. So never mind, we don't want that at all. I do like, in general, for reasons I kind of mentioned in the previous video, doing things through Doctrine is ideal for reasons like not confusing its cache. I've made sure that that isn't a problem in the way that the pet activities are processed. Yeah, it's not going to work even the 5th or 7th or 20th time. I'll keep doing this. I might look into that later. I know there's another way to delete without having to have a reference to the item, because what I don't want to do for performance type reasons is go and look up the item first and then delete it, because then you're doing 2 database calls to delete. We can just do it in 1. So yeah. The other thing I kind of want to do here, if it's a string, find it by string. Yeah, I remember that. I just want to add a little type hinting thing. This could be either an item or it could be a string. So you can't, unfortunately, do that in, you can do this in TypeScript, you can't do it in PHP, of like, oh, this parameter could be one of 2 types. PHP is like, I don't even know what you're talking about. You can do it in, again, you can do it in TypeScript. I shouldn't say Angular, but TypeScript, the actual language that Angular is using. And you can do it in these annotations. So doing it here now, I will also get IDE help. So anyway, now we have to do the fun thing, like last time, of 154 calls to lose item. Here's a better idea. I'm not going to bore you with that again. I will do this myself. I'm going to stop recording and do that, and then I'll come back right afterwards, and we can continue coding up, throwing away items, and it will all be great and lovely. Thank you for watching, and if you're interested in watching the next video, then you will hear from me in 2 seconds. Whereas for me, it will be, I don't know, 15 minutes? I don't even know. Let's find out. You can find out by keeping track of my time. I won't, because I don't care. Thanks again, and goodbye for now, I hope.